Good morning and welcome to the May 17, 2017 edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. William Cullen Bryant was only 17 years old in 1811 when he wrote the great poem about life and death called Thanatopsis. He would go on to do other things, but this is what he was known for. And he never recaptured the magnificence in his writing that he had when he penned that at the young age of 17. Orson Welles was a child prodigy and directed phenomenal things, including at a very young age of like 23, what many people think is the greatest movie ever made, Citizen Kane. And yet then his whole life was a downhill spiral from there. Why is it that so often we see this repeated, this story about people who start off so very well and then cannot recapture that glory, cannot sustain the ability, and just end up kind of in a sad situation? King Solomon is an example of that same thing. You know, most people who only know cursory about the Bible, they only remember him in his glory days, and perhaps that's good for him and his PR department, but it's not a true and accurate representation of the man's whole life. We remember the very young king who had the wisdom to ask for discernment for his people. We remember the young king whom God actually called his beloved. We don't remember how this man squandered so much of his abilities, that wisdom, and all the good that he could do. And we don't remember how he left his country when he died in a very bad situation, literally days from the eruption of a civil war that would forever tear asunder his nation. Now, why do I mention all this? I mention all this because King Solomon is a warning, especially to those of us who have known God all our lives and who have started out fairly well in the service of God. It's a frightening, frightening story to me, and it's one that I try to remember lest I start to deviate too far off the path. You see, this king, and we know this from 1 Kings and 1 Chronicles, King Solomon had everything going for him. He had King David, who had finally gotten his act together in his old age and was finally a good father, a attentive father to young Solomon, who taught him the ways of the Lord. He had a good heart. He had God on his side, if you will, absolutely. And he was given every advantage possible. He did a lot of good, apparently early in his career with that. He made all kind of wonderful treaty arrangements. He had all kind of trading going on all over the world that brought untold wealth and prosperity to his people. But then what did he do? He took all that wisdom and he wrote Proverbs, which is full of great wisdom. He knew the law. He knew what Deuteronomy said a king was to do. A king was not to multiply his wives, was not to amass great gold and silver for himself. And yet, what did he do? Knowing all that, he went absolutely against it. He went with the culture of the time instead of the wisdom that is timeless. And he got himself in a mess. We're told in 1 Kings that his many wives, and he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. He went nuts with this. All of that, whether it was for political or for his own pleasure or a little bit of both, it was ridiculous. And he did that because he thought that was the way that kings acted. He knew better. He knew better than that. He had taught and written better than that. In Proverbs, there is a figure known as the teacher, and most scholars believe that that is his veiled way of talking about himself. He knew better than all of this, and yet he did it anyway. First Kings tells us that those multitude of wives turned his heart away from God so that he was not of one mind. Now that doesn't mean he didn't still worship the Lord, but he worshiped other gods apparently as well, or at least tolerated them. Even the terrible god Molech, who had sacrifices of children. So it shows you how far, you might say, the best of us, so to speak, the ones who should know better, who've been trained better, who have every advantage, how far we can fall. It was so bad that he taxed his people so mercilessly in his later years that within days of his death, he had a son who, again, had not been apparently well trained by his father. And he said, oh, you think Dad made it hard on you? I'm going to make it even harder. He rejected the counsel of the older, wiser, experienced counselors for the ridiculous counsel of his young hoodlum friends. And it caused a civil war and the break of the kingdom. God told Solomon that he was going to do this, but out of kindness, he let Solomon live out his reign under a united kingdom, probably out of memory of what he had been and out of memory of his father, David. But as soon as he was dead, the kingdom was ripped asunder, and then we only had Israel and Judah as separate nations, never again to be reunited under a single king. It's a sad commentary, and it's one that we need to pay special attention to. We do not want to go down that road. It is good to start well. It is more important that we finish well. Let us run with perseverance the race set before us, and let us not grow weary in doing good, but press on. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me tomorrow on the next edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details.